The chief of staff of Volodymyr Zelensky was forced to resign as corruption scandals continue to rock the Ukrainian regime, giving hundreds of billions of dollars to one of the most corrupt countries in the world. What could go wrong? Investigators seized entire safes full of cash as Ukrainian officials used code names like the Professor and Alibaba in order to conceal their identity. You guys really kept the cash in safes that could easily be raided? Complete amateurs. Think about the massive betrayal this is. These scumbags stealing aid and enriching themselves while promoting endless war with Russia, while the Ukrainian people suffer. This is why the Ukrainian people are outraged and why Zelensky is more unpopular than ever, and he will lose in a landslide if his corrupt regime ever held an election. The corruption and incompetence of Ukraine is so bad that the Western media is finally covering it, and the Western powers are finally thinking about getting rid of their puppet Zelensky. Now Europe is in complete disarray, as it's clear they have no end game in mind as the Ukrainian government continues to fall apart. NATO and the West just need to take the L and negotiate for peace.
What's poppin', my friends, my family? Welcome back, Nick of Primetime. You guys notice how none of the liberals are wearing Venezuelan flags in solidarity with the Venezuelan people? The same way that they wear the Ukrainian flags in solidarity with Ukraine. Why aren't like the average Democrat normie standing with Venezuela right now in the midst of Donald Trump's insane threats against the country? He's not even pretending to make a coherent argument, a rational argument for his military aggression against Venezuela. He's just making up some nonsense. And you know that the liberals are not standing with Venezuela. They're not standing with Maduro. I unapologetically stand with Nicolas Maduro. Why are the liberals who have Ukraine flags in their profile picture refusing to tell the truth about the reality that everything that the United States said about Venezuela was a lie? Maybe Venezuela is not Nazi enough for them? Maybe if Venezuela and Nicolas Maduro banned socialist parties and it was murdering ethnic minorities, maybe then the liberal class will stand with them. But we will get to that much sooner. I'm gonna cover a little bit of the corruption of the state that they do care for. So what is that? Is that just racism? Is that just them being useful idiots? They know exactly what they're doing. The same reason why Zohran Mamdani was repeating CIA propaganda against Venezuela right before this military campaign popped off. They know exactly what they're doing, and they are extremely racist, evil, and deranged. They don't get credit enough for that. How absolutely deranged these people are. I unapologetically stand with Nicolas Maduro. What's poppin', my friends? Oh yeah, no kick today. I'm streaming on X, Twitch, and YouTube. Oh shit, I forgot to Rumble too. Oh well, we just call this a YouTube exclusive. Damn, I forgot to get Kick and Rumble today. It's all good. Cause we're gonna have our homie Jamarl Thomas on. Jamarl been killing the game. Fantastic citizen journalist. I'm just trying to get on his level. You know what I mean? I'm trying to level up to all these big shots like Jamarl Thomas, Savvy Sav, and them. I appreciate all you guys who actually do watch me. Because we got a lot of breakdown today. You guys know I'm always in the lab cooking. Always in the lab cooking. So let's just dive right into this. Zelensky faces political peril as corruption scandal consumes top aid. And as I described in the hotspot video, there should be massive anger. I mean, there is massive anger in the Ukrainian state. This is why Zelensky would never in a million years hold an election. If he was to hold an election, he would lose in a complete landslide. The Ukrainian people seen how Zelensky sold them out. Yeah, you guys know my personal YouTube channel is popping now, man. We only been doing this for about a month. What's poppin'? Zoya's love, Zoya's life. But this corruption has been apparent in Ukraine. I covered this, 2 years ago, Zoya? Zoya, remember my fam? Remember how I covered the story how Ukrainian aid was audited? And they couldn't find only like 40% of the Ukraine aid that the United States sent over was accounted for. You had Seymour Hersh and many legitimate reporting on this, and the entirety of the corporate media called it a Russian hoax, Russian propaganda. You had a DHS under Joe Biden's administration that wrote a report outlining how they couldn't accurately track weapon shipments to Ukraine, and because of that, they was deeply concerned about a surge in the black market for guns for terrorists in Africa, for neo-Nazis who may be coming back home. They would worry about a black market boom in guns. These are things that are easily confirmable, information that's been out there. But isn't it interesting how Zohran Mamdani and Bernie Sanders and all the scumbag DSA, Hakeem Jeffries, Democrats, they will never call out Ukraine for their corruption. In fact, they support it. People like Matt Duss, the entirety of the NATO left. You know that Zohran Mamdani is part of NATO left. He's been avoiding talking about this topic like the plague. Zohran just came out with another interview repeating the narrative that Maduro is a tyrant who represses his political enemies. Zelensky in Ukraine repressed the political enemies. In fact, they banned socialist parties. They banned political opposition. You had the Banderite fascists in Ukraine who kidnapped and tortured people who they considered to be pro-Russian. Everything, and I cannot emphasize this enough, quite literally everything that they told you about the Ukrainian regime, about the Venezuelan Maduro government, it's true of the Zelensky Ukraine regime. But we live in a modern axis of evil where everything is inverted. You can't even get a Democrat to call any of this out. When it comes to Venezuela, Democrats are like, hey, Donald Trump, you need congressional approval to commit war crimes? We're upset because Donald Trump is committing war crimes without our approval. Come achieve congressional approval. That's the number one critique of the opposition party. It's a complete scam. In Europe, despite the complete exposure of the fraudulent government in Ukraine, which is, by the way, unelected, unlike Nicolas Maduro. Nicolas Maduro was democratically elected multiple times, so much so that the establishment has been in pure cult mode, and they realize that there's nothing they can do to get rid of the Venezuelan government. This is why they are resorting to war now, because the sanctions failed to win over the hearts and minds of the Venezuelan people. Meanwhile, they want us to stand with Ukraine, which is an undemocratic, fascist country. What's poppin', Raina? Yeah, Democrats have been completely silent. Yeah, what's poppin', fam? Yeah, we've been calling out the money laundering. A lot of the Ukraine aid ended up in terrorist groups. We all know USAID was caught funding the Mujahideen and many other terrorist groups in Africa. But when confronted by the massive corruption, because France had a press conference today, wonder if I can find footage of this. I saw some footage floating around. No, the one I saw wasn't in English. That's why I didn't really bother digging it up. But the EU is harshly rejecting. Hell, here's I see RT tweeted a little bit about it. And the EU is essentially rejecting any premise of any sort of peace talks and negotiation, even though they completely lost. They're willing to completely destroy Ukraine as a country because it's a massive money laundering scheme. people like, why is the West so obsessed with continuing this war against Ukraine when they stand no chance? It's because the arms manufacturers are making big profit. Yeah, the EU has fallen to outright fascism, but they get no grief from. You see all the wave of leftists who are like, we gotta condemn China because China's not doing enough to resist the genocide in Gaza. Like, bro, these people got heat for China, and I've never seen them bring up the heat towards the EU. I said it many times before because I understand the criticism that some people have because they want everyone to do everything they can to stop Israel. But if you're one of the people who upset because China still trades with Israel, I always bring up the EU as an example. Because you guys know the EU is sending arms shipments to the UAE. The UAE is directly funding and complicit with the genocide in Sudan. The EU is directly financing that. It's directly sending weapons to Sudan that they know will funnel a genocide. So my rebuttal to people is, does China halt trade to the EU because the EU has gone full-blown fascist? Where does that end? Where does that end? Because if China refused to trade with the EU because of the genocide in Sudan, we're talking about complete economic collapse. Does China refuse to trade with the United States because all the crimes that the United States committed? You guys see how this quickly becomes destabilizing? And which is why I don't have any problem with China's position. They don't want to destabilize international trade based on foreign policy decisions that other countries made because they have a generally anti-imperialist mindset. Now, I understand why people want to live in a fairy tale. They want to live in a fairy tale where China can just economically shut down these countries. That's not the reality of what we're talking about. Massive pain that everyone will have to deal with. But if you believe that China should do that for Palestine, why not Sudan? Why not for the Congo? Why not for African lives? These are things I've been wondering. Why do people call for China to completely destroy international trade? And I think the world should react very definitively in response to Israel genocide. But why is Israel-Palestine way more important to people's mind than all the victims of the genocide in Sudan? Because if you want to have that same mentality, keep that same energy up for the EU. They never do. They never do. I understand that things are messy. China has to exist in this evil imperialist capitalist structure that the West enabled, and it's our job to end Zionism. It's the European job to end the genocide in Sudan, and to end our crimes. That's why I don't like. You guys see how if you go through this circle of blaming other countries that you're not involved with, you guys see how it never ends. You guys see how you never actually reach a coherent answer to these questions. The reason why people blame China and people in the West who enable Zionism, you got people who can't even stop watching Disney. Like, you motherfuckers can't even stop watching Disney, ESPN, and funding the Zionist regime, but they lash out at other countries because they know they're ultimately powerless. And how I mean, I don't want to be too judgmental because I understand it on the base point where you just want to lash out because you feel like you have no power. No, that's not the way I roll, man. I think we need to take responsibility for the evils our government is doing and lead by example. And I think China is leading by example by, not funding wars and genocide. I'm glad you guys found me too, bro. I told you, man, our audience is slowly finding me, man. RBN has been shadow banned for quite some time. In RBN, we wanted to decentralize a little bit more, so our big tech overlords can't just take out one channel at once. So actually, I'm about 15 minutes in, so I'm gonna end the RBN stream because we have Jamarl Thomas, who will be joining us here very soon. He's our guest today. He's been dropping bangers too. So I'm gonna end the RBN stream. If you're watching on the RBN stream on YouTube, I am still streaming on my personal channel on Twitch and on X. I saw